Monday, July 24th of 2023. Going to go to the first agenda on the end, which is attendance of members of the panel. So why don't we start to my left and we'll move to the right. Henrietta.
Yes, I'm Henrietta Cosentino. Can you, is this? There. Henrietta Cosentino, appointed by the Plymouth Select Board in November of 2021.
Jonathan Goldberg, Massachusetts Department of Public Utilities.
David Bryant, Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency.
David, welcome. And Jonathan.
Seth Pickering, Mass DEP, appointed by the Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs.
Mary Lampert, appointed by the Senate President.
John Mahoney, Plymouth Select Board designee.
Pine Dubois, appointed by the Speaker of the House.
Mary Gatzlik, appointed by the Minority Leader.
Mike Fortini is appointed by the Senate Minority Leader.
Jim Lampert, appointed by the Speaker of the House.
Kelly O'Brien, Local 369.
John Moylan, Holtec, Pilgrim Vice President.
Dave Noyes, HDI Compliance Manager.
Okay, I'm looking at the remote participants. It looks like we got three right in a row there. Mary, Andrew, and Jack. Do you introduce yourselves?
Mary Waldron, Old Colony Planning Council. Good evening.
Thank you, Mary.
Jack Priest, Department of Public Health, representing the Commissioner's Office.
Andrew Gottlieb, appointed by Governor Baker, representing the Association Preserve Cape Cod.
Thank you, Andrew and Jack.
And did Jennifer leave? She was on.
Jennifer.
Burrell, I think.
Jennifer Burrell.
I'm Jennifer Burrell. I'm the Deputy Commissioner at the Department of Public Health, and I'm representing the Executive Office of Health and Human Services.
Thank you, Jennifer. Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the next agenda on the next item on the agenda, the previous meeting's minutes.
I'll start off. I just had a couple of other people in attendance, including Neil Sheehan from the NRC, John Drabinsky from ERM, Representative Lenatra, and Christopher Jean, also of Rep. Lenatra's office. I don't know if anybody else was here, but that's what I got on my notes.
Microphone.
Hi, there's a couple folks on the from the Senator's office. And then Michael Jackman.
Okay, thanks, Nicole.
Nicole, you were there last time? Well, that's what I was looking for. We're doing the minutes from the last meeting. Okay, thanks.
Dave.
So in the bottom of page 4, under the Holtec update, the last line says for reactor segmentation, lower core plate, shroud ring, and jet pumps were removed. The lower core plate was in the process of being removed, and the shroud ring and jet pumps were scheduled to be removed in July and August.
Dave, would you mind writing that down and sending it to me?
I'd be happy to.
Okay, thanks.
John?
Yes. Jim.
A question with respect to the minutes. The bottom, I'm referring to the bottom of page 2. And the minutes throughout, as we all noticed, and I think it's a good idea, refer to the videos of the meetings. The question I have is, what are we doing to ensure that those videos will remain available, without which, if we don't have them, if they're not available, the minute references to see the video get to be pretty useless. Do we have the ability to ensure that those will be maintained for the life of NDCAP?
We have PAC TV's pledge that they'll do the best they can. We put it online, and if you want to record it so that it's done, then you would be doing a service to the world, I suppose, by making an archive. But that's the best we can do right now.
I guess I'm obviously incapable of making an archive, but I think we do need to ensure for completeness of the record that these are always going to be there.
I suggest you maybe talk to the Executive Office of Environmental Affairs or somebody to do that, because I don't have the capacity.
You don't what?
I don't have the capacity I think you're asking for something that requires funding. I don't have it, you don't have it, we don't have it. So therefore, if you talk to somebody that does have that capacity, that's the way to go on that. I think it's worth saying, you know, I think it's worth asking. But
Yeah,
I
how would
don't
you
think,
expect it
I
to
don't
be?
think PAC TV can say, you know, that the YouTube thing is going to stay up forever. I don't know that that's possible, but that's what you're asking.
I'm just asking if anything we could do, that I'd expect the chair or vice chair to find out what we can do to make sure that these are maintained as part of the administrative procedures for this panel. That's the only comment.
Any other concern for the previous meeting's minutes? Is there any motion to approve them with the respective changes?
Mary Waldron, motion to approve.
Second.
So we have a motion by Mary Waldron and a second by who? Henrietta?
Henrietta got in there first.
Henrietta, thank you. Discussion on the motion? All those in favor of approving the minutes from the last meeting? Raise your hand. You in the affirmative?
Are you in the affirmative?
Yes, I am, sorry. Looks like we have 3 at home, so it looks like it's unanimous. And one abstention. Jennifer, you abstaining? Forgive me,
Yes, thank
two
you.
abstentions, so everybody had their hand raised. There was none against, 2 abstentions.
John, I'd like to make a motion.
Yes, Mary?
Here's a copy. I move that NDCAP's website is changed to have on the front page the following. Change the 6th bullet on the front page from Tritium fact sheet to resources with a hyperlink to a resource page. Initially, the resource page will list 2 subjects, tritium and Cape Cod water circulation, as follows. 1, tritium. Lists the 4 titles below with hyperlinks. Plymouth Board of Health Symposium on Tritium, Exploring Tritium Dangers by Dr. Arjun Markajani, The Hazards of Tritium, Dr. Ian Fairley, Tritium Fact Sheet, Health Physics Society. 2, second bullet on the resource page, Cape Cod Bay water circulation. Spreading pathways of Pilgrim Nuclear Power Station waterway in and around Cape Cod Bay, estimates from the ocean drifter observations by Dr. Irina Rapina on Science Direct, a link. Note, this format will allow adding bullets for other resource topics. As changed, the first page of the website and the resource page will be shown on pages 2 and 3. Why am I making this motion?
I'll second the motion.
I'm making this motion because I received 2 emails which pointed out the importance of making the motion. One email was from Dr. Barry Potvin, chair of the Plymouth Board of Health. The email said, quote, and this is short, please read the ignored emails to NDCAP from Dr. Potvin, May 23rd and July 17th, asking for time at meetings or for the inclusion of tritium information and links onto the NDCAP website into the public record at Monday's meeting, and ask why all such requests have been ignored, even though such actions suggest intentional bias and or a deliberate attempt to suppress opposing views about tritium's health hazards from the public and the website. State and federal officials should also know about our frustrations in seeking to provide fair and balanced, reliable information. The second email, which is short, is from a telephone conversation of Margaret Raskin to Pine Dubois regarding Raskin's request to show short slide presentation based on Makajani's book on tritium. Here it is. Margaret Rankin, called tonight to report that after getting no response from Pine, she finally, quote, ambushed Pine by phone. Pine told her she would not approve their proposed presentation because it was just adding to the hysteria, and that with rising waters, the water would flow right out to the greater Atlantic. It was clear she hadn't looked at the slides. I think these are, I have a responsibility if someone
Mr. Chairman, I object to being misquoted and to having stuff like that brought up in the public meeting like this. It's ridiculous. And I oppose the ongoing slander that Mary Lampert is engaging in.
I didn't regard...
Duly noted.
I do not regard reading what I have received as slander. Period. There was no coats and hat put on what I read. These are factual statements, period. And I think that explains, at least to me, why it would be a good idea to have a balanced resource list on the website. Thank you for your consideration.
So, Mary, before I entertain somebody seconding discussion.
I seconded, John.
I'm sorry, there was a second from...
Yeah, I seconded.
Right, yes.
I do go home.
Am I the only one right now that has a copy of the motion that you just presented?
Do you want another one?
Do you have 12 more?
No, I don't have 12 more.
So I'm the only one that has a copy of what you just read?
Yeah.
Correct, okay.
Yeah.
So,
In fact, I did it today.
right. So I guess you don't feel more comfortable having this as an agenda item at the next meeting?
I would accept that as a amendment, and the reason being, I know we have other important things to discuss. So I'd be very happy to email that to the entire group, and then we can discuss it next, at the next meeting. Is that okay with you?
It's certainly okay with me, so does that mean you're
Yeah, it's okay with me.
You're
John?
withdrawing your motion?
Yeah, I'm deferring it. Would that be the proper way to put it? Deferring it to our September meeting.
Okay. And will your husband withdraw his second?
John, I don't believe anyone is withdrawing the motion. I believe the suggestion is that we do, as we have done before, which is accede to a request that a motion be put off for discussion until the next meeting, so that, among other things, all members of the panel, including the state employees who may have to seek advice from the secretaries they represent, can consider them. I don't think the motion is either being withdrawn and the second is not being withdrawn. It's simply a motion to defer. You've asked to defer consideration of the motion until the next meeting, and I believe that's acceptable to both of us.
Yes, correct.
So are you expecting a vote on that? Or
At the next meeting.
At the next
Okay.
meeting.
All right, so we will make sure that we put that on the agenda for the meeting that comes up in late September. Yes, Henrietta?
Yes, I just wanted to add a couple of comments. I wasn't sure that this motion would be offered tonight, but I very much support it for whenever it comes up, because I was frankly quite dismayed to read the agenda when it came out and discover that not only were requests from Dr. Potvin and Thomas and Margaret Rankin unacknowledged, but there were several other requests unacknowledged as well. And I think that it's very serious when serious requests from, whether it's from the public or from panelists, are simply ignored. Ignored.
I'm sorry, holding the microphone, we can hear all the movement of your fingers.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. So I was distressed to see that numerous requests for either links on the web page or presentations at the NDCAP itself were rudely ignored, never acknowledged. And this is not right. It just isn't right. So the agenda, which was made up for today, does not directly address the main concern of the public, which is what's going to happen with the water. One of the requests that was made early on, I think it was in around July 3rd, was that Mary Lampert herself suggested putting on the agenda some time to discuss the various options for dispersal of the waters. I seconded her suggestion, saying that that would be very refreshing to have an actual discussion about the actual issues that concern us. But again, those emails were not acknowledged. And we talk about the importance of transparency, but we really ought to be doing the modeling for transparency if we're going to insist on that from other agencies.
Okay, so we're about to move on to the next agenda item, which is an update from our state and federal delegation. But before we go there, let's talk about transparency. And obviously, with respect to Dr. Potvin, I don't know what happened there, and it's unfortunate that that happened, and we can work to rectify that. With respect to the Rankins, Mr. Rankin.
Yes.
Okay, he and I communicated via email. He asked me months ago not to share his potential presentation with anyone. A couple weeks ago, he reached out to me again via email. I asked him for permission to share the presentation with others prior to the meeting, especially the individual to my right. I wasn't granted permission. And I told him if I didn't have their permission, he wasn't getting on the agenda. Okay? And then I was standing on an elevator last week, because that's what I do for a living, and the phone rang, and it was his niece. And she accused me of censoring him. And I said, "You have it wrong." Okay? And I explained to her the situation, which led to a flurry of emails to the individual to my right. So that's what happened there. Okay? Moving on, we're going to go on to Senator Moran. And then after Senator Moran gives us an update from Beacon Hill, we're going to add on at this part of the agenda Mr. Jim Cantwell, coming from Senator Markey's office, and anybody else who represents Mr. Markey or Mr. Keating or Ms. Warren who wants to piggyback on after Jim, they're more than welcome to add in any comments then. Senator, how are you?
Very well tonight, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the opportunity. Good evening, members. As you know, the state and federal legislative delegation have fought for greater transparency and understanding the negative impacts the discharge of radioactive water would have on Cape Cod Bay. Through our partnership with the Department of Environmental Protection, today we took a big step toward protecting our waters. As some of you may have heard by now, the Department of Environmental Protection has tentatively determined to deny Holtec's request for a permit modification. This denial would prevent them from discharging over 1 million gallons of radioactive wastewater from the spent fuel pool, Taurus dryer separator, and reactor cavities into Cape Cod Bay. There are members here, so I won't get into too much of the detail with respect to the DEP's decision, but firstly, the applicant's existing permit strictly prohibits discharging pollutants associated with spent fuel pool water, storm water from construction activities related to the dismantlement and demolition of the plant, and pollutants from the contaminated site dewatering resulting from the decommissioning process. The proposed discharge falls within the Cape Cod Bay Ocean Sanctuary, governed by the Ocean Sanctuaries Act, which unequivocally prohibits the dumping or discharge of industrial waste into the sanctuary. None of the Act's exemptions apply to the proposed discharge, including those related to power generation facilities or existing discharges authorized before December 8, 1971. This is very welcome news today from DEP, and I thank them and all their hardworking staff that thoroughly reviewed the case and continue to work hard to protect our bay. But this fight is not over today. This is only a tentative determination open to public comment until August 28th at 5 p.m. I urge all of you to keep pushing forward, submit comments, and ensure that the decision is finalized. Our state and federal legislative delegation greatly appreciates the panel's close attention on this matter. This decision will codify what we have all been arguing, that Holtec has a legal obligation to finding another form of disposal for its wastewater that won't have an impact on the public health, economic vitality, environmental diversity of our communities, and including the young boy who was testified prior today about having difficulty sleeping and worrying about the future. I particularly want to thank the advocates as well as my partners in both the Plymouth and Cape delegations. And Rep. Muratori, with your permission, Mr. Chair, was unable to make it this evening, but had sent over the following quick comment. Although the state ruled that DEP has said Holtec can't discharge in Cape Cod Bay, please keep in mind DPH oversees radiation, and that still needs to be resolved. Of course, it is assumed that the materials in the discharge water will be removed totally by Holtec. If for some reason that happens, then the radiated water will need to be dealt with through DPH, and that was Muratori's addition.
Thank you, Senator. It looks like Jack Priest would like to ask a question or make a statement. Jack.
Thank you.
I just wanted to make a statement. The Department of Public Health is not the regulator for radioactive material discharged from the Pilgrim Station. That is under the purview of the Environmental Protection Agency and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission.
And so that's in response to the statement that the Senator read from Rep. Muratori? Jack?
That's correct.
Thank you.
That's correct.
Okay, duly noted, thank you. Jim Cantwell.
Mr. Chair, John, how are you?
Very well, and you? How's your summer going?
Things are good, busy, but I appreciate the opportunity to do a brief statement from Senator Markey. And thank you, John. Thank you, all members of the NDCAP. I know that this is a very important issue, and emotions can get high, but this is a very good day. For those who I haven't had the great opportunity to meet, I apologize for not being there in person. My name is Jim Cantwell. I have the great honor of being the state director for Senator Ed Markey. I'm joined on this call by two amazing colleagues, Ben Thomas and Katie Morphle from our office. In addition, our close friends and partners, Mike Jackman from Congressman Keating's office. He's the district director. Caleb White is the regional director for Senator Warren's office. They are attending. I believe they may have statements as well. I'm here to deliver a brief statement on behalf of Senator Markey. The statement begins, this is a great day for environmental justice. Mass DEP's decision to deny Holtec's permit modification request is a win for the environment and for all of the people, businesses, and organizations that rely on Cape Cod's reputation for clean and safe water. When Holtec took over the decommissioning of the Pilgrim Nuclear Power Station in 2019, the company promised this community and this region an open and transparent decommissioning process, a promise that Holtec's CEO repeated to Senator Markey in an historic hearing that Senator Markey chaired in Plymouth in 2022, right at that same town hall, as you know so well, Mr. Chairman. In the years since, Holtec has fallen woefully short on the commitment, particularly with regard to its plans to discharge 1 million gallons of radioactive water into Cape Cod Bay, despite vehement opposition from local stakeholders. I would note in that hearing, by the way, Mr. Chairman, that Dr. Singh, the president for Holtec, promised that there would be no discharge unless it was with the agreement of the stakeholders. There is no such agreement, and indeed, as we hear today, we have significant continuing concerns. Senator Markey applauds the Healy administration and the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection for following the science, upholding the Massachusetts Ocean Sanctuaries Act, and heeding local concerns in its decision to rightfully deny Holtec's request. We'd want to note to thank Andrew Gottlieb, the Executive Director for the Association to Preserve Cape Cod, who is making that argument about the Massachusetts Ocean Sanctuaries Act, Pixie Lampert, Jim Lampert, knowing additionally Diane Turco. A number of voices have been saying this for now over a year, and we are quite excited to see the decision that we can make available into the record, John. We can email you the decision, but this is one, I know you'll be hearing from Seth just momentarily, so this is a moment for Seth, for your department to be able to make it a terrific public announcement about your great work. Senator Markey ends by saying he'll continue to work with Senator Warren and Congressman Keating to amplify the concerns of Plymouth and Cape Cod communities, to work closely with Sue Moran, our very close friend in our Cape Cod delegation, as well as I know Matt Muratori, who may or may not be there, Kathy Lenatra, Josh Cutler, all the state reps who've been working so hard on this, and to hold Holtec accountable to the people of Cape Cod Bay. Thank you, Chair Mahoney, Vice Chair Dubois, all members of the NDCAP. Appreciate the opportunity to be heard and to have this read into the record from Senator Markey. Thank you very much, John.
You're welcome, Jim. Thank you. And Jim, you're going to forward that to the committee? You'll email that along?
I will forward you the senator's statement, and frankly, it's not my place, but attached to it is a decision from DEP. I know Seth Pickering is there, so Seth probably has a decision if you have not have it handed, but we'll send that to you as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone from Senator Warren's office that would like to, need to add any comments to the discussion?
Yes, Caleb White here. Thank you, Chair. Caleb White, I'm the Regional Director for the South Coast Cape and Islands for Senator Warren. I just wanted to take a moment to read a quick statement from the Senator earlier, which is available on socials and can also be forwarded following this meeting. But Senator Warren says the Healy administration's action to reject efforts to dump nuclear plant waste in the Cape Cod Bay is triumph for environmental justice. Mass DEP's decision follows science and reflects the community concerns. I'll keep working with Senator Markey and Rep. Keating to hold Holtec accountable. And for me personally, thank you all for your voices. Thank you to the advocates in the room tonight. And thank you, Chair, for the brief opportunity to share a statement from the Senator.
No problem, Caleb. You're welcome. Thank you. And you can send that along also, Caleb?
Yes, will do.
Okay, appreciate that. Mr. Jackman.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I apologize for being off camera. I'm trying to attend 2 meetings at once here, but just don't have a statement to read. Just very pleased, the Congressman very pleased with the announcement. Look forward to the public comment period to hear what folks have to say about the importance of this issue. And thank you to everyone in the room and NDCAP for all the work that's been done on this issue. Thank you.
Yep. You're welcome, Mike.
And John, just to reinforce, I know we mentioned them, but the federal partners, we all were texting just about how close working with Sue Moran and with the whole state delegation, but wanted to reinforce it's at all levels, government folks speaking at all in unison about opposing an ocean discharge of any of this waste.
Okay. All right, Jim, again, thank you. Thank you for Senator Moran for joining us tonight. Always a pleasure. And moving on to the next part of our agenda, it's Mr. Dave Noyes from Holtec providing us with the update on the progress of decommissioning every 60 days.
Just ask if we could call up the presentation. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our presentation for the July meeting starts with the swim lanes, the major workflow categories for activities that are occurring at the plant. I'll cover the first two on this slide, and the remaining have their own slides during the presentation. So with respect to characterization, investigation of the site property, we continue with sampling on site for both radiological and non-radiological characterization, moving toward a submission of a license termination plan that remains scheduled for October of 2024. With respect to the dry cask storage, continue as custodians for the dry fuel storage until the federal repository is established and shipping arrangements to be able to move the material in accordance with federal regulations and federal commitments to take custody of that high-level radioactive waste. With respect to demolition activities, since the last meeting, 2 structures on site have been demolished. One of them was the plant's security diesel generator, and the second was the plant's station blackout diesel generator. The picture that you see is on the far left is the security diesel generator enclosure. The enclosure was removed. The diesel generator inside was removed for salvage, and then the building was demolished down to grade. And the same thing occurred with the station blackout diesel generator. For upcoming demolition activities, the next activities are above ground storage tank demolitions. There's one remaining firewater storage tank, which is a 250,000 gallon capacity tank. It's the one on the left in the picture below. The demineralized water storage tank is a 50,000 gallon tank. That's the smaller of the 3 tanks toward the background of the picture. And then the 2 condensate storage tanks, each with 275,000 gallon capacity. Those tank demolitions will be removed in that order. First, the firewater storage tank, beginning within the next couple of weeks, demineralized water storage tank, and then the 2 condensate storage tanks, with all those tank removals to be completed by the end of September this year. So that takes us to a current status for demolition. As you see, the buildings on site that are highlighted in red, those are the ones that have been physically removed. The 2 arrows point to the locations of the security diesel generator and the station blackout diesel generator. And then the above ground storage tanks, the 4 that are at the top of the picture, are the ones that I mentioned are coming up by the end of September. With respect to segmentation of the reactor vessel, we continue with cutting and segmentation of the shroud ring, which is the lower part of the annulus that separated the feed water flow from the reactor water flow. Following the segmentation of that shroud ring into pieces that are sufficient to be able to be sent, shipped as waste, we'll remove the 20 jet pumps, which were components in the outer annulus of the reactor. And at that point, we will be in a position to be able to drain the reactor cavity to the flange elevation of the reactor vessel, and that water will drain to the torus. We will continue on with completing Class B and C waste packaging and staging that to be complete with all the with all that material staged by the end of October. With respect to that waste, the waste that's being removed from the internals of the reactor vessel, we have packaged 16 of what we anticipate will be 25 Class B and C waste containers. Those are currently being staged on site in a concrete facility in a shielded storage area. And those will remain on site pending the licensing of a transport cask that Holtec is in the process of developing. We expect that development to be completed by the end of this year, and then we'll start the NRC approval process, and that'll be anywhere from 12 to 18 months before that B&C waste material will be available to be able to be sent to disposal in Texas. So overall, with respect to waste management, looking at the waste that has been sent from the site, you can see by calendar year the cubic footage, the volume of material that has been shipped, and its radioactivity in Curie content. And then the 4-year total dating back to the last year of the last half year of the operating cycle and the entire decommissioning to over 218,000 cubic feet of radioactive material with a Curie content of just under 2,000 Curies that have been safely removed from the site and transported to disposal in the WCS facility in Andrews, Texas. And that completes my presentation. Pending questions.
Dave, 2 quick questions. First, with respect to the generators, I have forgotten, you said 2 have been taken out of service. Are any left?
Of the generators?
Do you still have generators on site?
Yes, the 2 emergency diesel generators are out of service and they've been electrically isolated, but they still remain on site.
And they're operable, so if you lose off-site power?
They're not operable, no.
So if you lose off-site power, do you have any other source of power now?
We do. We have 2 independent sources of off-site power. We have the startup transformer and the shutdown transformer. We also have the ability to be able to power the loads that are necessary in the plant via the other 23 kV line through the construction transformer.
Thank you. And just one more question on this slide. You give the volume of, what is it, 218,000?
Cubic feet.
Cubic feet.
Yes.
Do you have any idea what the total weight of that is?
I don't. No, not off the top of my head, I don't.
Thanks.
Any other questions for Mr. Noyes? Dave, thank you. What happened?
I don't know.
What happened? It's usually not that easy.
Must have been a great report.
It was pretty impressive.
Okay, moving on to the IWG.
I thought ERM.
It's, yeah.
ERM.
Who's doing that?
Probably John Drabinsky doing that? Yes.
Oh,
He's
okay.
on the TV.
Is he going to key that up here?
He's Davis doing it.
Okay.
I'll shut the fan off in my head.
John, whenever you're ready, I'll work through the slides.
Okay, well, first, thank you very much. One of these days, I look forward to meeting everyone in person, and I look forward tonight to discussing the MCP process on the non-radiological sampling plan that we submitted to DEP for approval. As part of the ongoing MCP process to identify the nature and extent and sources of potential contamination at the site, determine the risk, and then figure out what is the appropriate remedial response action to come to closure under the MCP. So I have a brief presentation to discuss what our proposed plan is, and I look forward to having questions at the end of the presentation. So thank you very much. And again, I apologize for not being there in person. I'd love to be there in person to meet everyone and get everything going. So, okay. So the first slide is basically a brief chronology and overview of the MCP regulations that we're going through at the site. And before I go, I just really want to thank all the state stakeholders for working with us cooperatively to get this process going smoothly and come to a successful conclusion for the MCP process. So thank you to Seth and Gerard. I appreciate that. And also to Jack on the radiological side. So back in 2021 and 2022, we determined there were a number of reportable concentrations under the MCP. And there were 5 reportable incidents that we reported to the DEP as the MCP requires. And the citation for that is, if people are interested, a 310 CMR 40.0315. And that basically spells out the process for identification of reportable concentrations. Subsequent additional studies in 2022, we found out that some of the concentrations that were reported were not really reportable, that the detection limits were higher than the reportable concentrations. We did more sophisticated testing and indicated those compounds weren't there. Excuse me, so back in 2023, we did some additional investigation and found, linked the 2 off-site and 1 off-site reportable concentrations to 1 site link, and that is the second bullet there. So just trying to get this going. I'm sorry. Because I can't, okay. So the next thing we submitted was the phase 1 site characterization report, which required under the MCP, and that was submitted back in 2022. And the next submittal coming forward is the comprehensive phase 2 site assessment, which is due in 2025. And the purpose of the phase 2 is determine the nature and extent of contamination, try to find out where the sources of contamination are coming from, and conduct a risk assessment to see what sort of risk the contaminants on site are causing to human health and ecological health. So, and we're going to use this scope of work in conjunction with working with the DEP to plan our future activities at the site to make sure that we come to compliance on the MCP. Next slide, Dave. So the next slide here basically shows a couple of things. It shows all the wells on site, the black dots. The heavily blue lines are the groundwater contours to show the elevations of groundwater measured in the monitoring wells at site. And just for your knowledge, there are approximately 40 monitoring wells on site that we measure not only the groundwater elevations, but groundwater chemistry. And based on that, you can see to the left is the regional groundwater flow map, which indicates that the groundwater flow is from southwest to northeast, which is expected and discharges to Cape Cod Bay. The figure to the right is a detailed groundwater contour map of the site proper. The red building, the red outline is the power block. And as you can see, there are minor perturbations of the groundwater flow map based on the really comprehensive network of wells around the power block and around the site. So basically, based on the regional groundwater flow and the local groundwater flow are consistent, and groundwater is flowing from the southwest to the northeast and discharging to Cape Cod Bay. Next slide, Dave. So this slide basically shows some of the contamination that we've, or I'll say impacts that we detected on site. And basically this figure shows the PFAS concentrations that we measured in groundwater. And of the more than 30 wells we sampled on site, we only found PFAS in 4 wells. And as you can see, the PFAS concentrations are 20 nanograms per liter. And the highest concentration that we detected at site was at HA20 at 72 nanograms per liter. The other wells that we found PFAS at the site are MW201, which is in red in this figure, HA6, HA19, and HA20, which are red. The dots in green indicate wells that we sampled for PFAS, but we did not detect any PFAS in those locations. So we are proposing to DEP that all the wells that are in yellow that we will analyze for PFAS, and we'll look both upgradient and downgradient of the detections that we've found both off-site and on-site to see if we can identify the potential source of PFAS. And I think everyone here on the call knows that PFAS is basically, a compound of interest for a lot of reasons. And we're trying to find out where the source of PFAS is coming from, and then hopefully be able to mitigate the impact on groundwater. Next slide, Dave. So this slide shows the combination of benzoate pyrene, arsenic, and vanadium that we found on site. And we've only found, from all the wells we've analyzed on site, we've only found arsenic in one well, MW216. We found benzoate pyrene in only one well, HA8, and vanadium in only one well, HA6. So the figure here shows the exact same thing. We're in green, we did not detect it. In red, we did detect it. And then in yellow shows that the monitoring wells that will sample upgrading and downgrading. And then the picture to the far right, lower right, basically shows the groundwater flow direction, again, consistent with what we reported before, and showing that we will be sampling and looking for upgrading and downgrading for hopefully identifying the potential source of compounds of interest. And as you can see in the lower right-hand corner, that the detections of PFAS, arsenic, benzoate pyrene, and vanadium are just slightly above the reportable concentration. So we have very, very low levels of both PFAS, benzoate pyrene, arsenic, and vanadium at the property here. And I would say in my 35 plus years of doing environmental investigations in Massachusetts, from my perspective, it's the site is very, from an MCP perspective, quite clean. And we'll get to the bottom, determine where these minor sources of contaminants are coming from. Next slide, Dave. So we put together a detailed proposed groundwater monitoring plan to DEP. DEP is in the process of reviewing it. And basically, going forward, we will be looking at confirming our groundwater flow directions, looking at the chemistry of benzoate pyrene, vanadium, arsenic, and PFAS to see if we can determine the nature and extent and the sources of the material. And the reportable concentrations here are quite low because the groundwater aquifer here is characterized as GW1, which is because it's a sole source aquifer and has potential for being used for drinking water. However, at the site, there's no drinking water from groundwater. It's basically Plymouth public water supply. So going forward, we will use this information and do an iterative process looking at the groundwater flow data, the chemistry data, to come up with the nature and extent of contaminants at site, potentially finding sources, and then doing a risk assessment so we can determine what is the appropriate mitigation to correct the non-radiological impacts at the site. And with that, I'll open it up to questions. And again, I look forward to meeting everyone in person. So there's nothing more like being face-to-face with discussing technical issues. So I thank you for your time and look forward to your questions.
Any questions for John? Fine.
Hi, John. Thanks so much for giving us that.
I apologize for not being there in person. Fine, I missed that.
I look forward to you being back. Do you have, it's a little hard to follow you on the slides because I can barely see it all, but it looked to me as though all of those things were together, that the same wells.
The majority of the impact seems to be around and adjacent to the power block, except for the PFAS. The PFAS, highest level of PFAS are off-site to the southwest. I think it's well HA20. And perhaps, Dave, we can give the NDCAP a copy of the presentation.
Block to the southwest?
Way to the southwest. I don't know if you can put that slide up again, Dave. It's probably a good half a mile to 3/4 mile from the site.
Really?
It's real.
So you think it's migrating to the site from there?
I don't think so. It looks like it is, but my geologic
Is that really the
sense
direction
and
of
just
the groundwater flow?
groundwater flow is from
the north?
southwest to northeast. It's possible, it's possible.
Okay.
But we need to do more work to define that.
And is there a schedule associated with that that you can estimate now?
Yes. We hope to be out there sampling the end of August, September. Takes 3 to 6 weeks to get the results back, and then based on the results, we'll hopefully report back to you folks and then determine whether we need another round of sampling or change our sampling locations. As I said, it's an iterative process. It's not locked in stone. Depending on the results, we move around and change.
So do you think there's a potential, can I say, for removing a source pile of something or whatever in order to stem the tide, so to speak?
There's always a potential, but the numbers are quite low. Even though the drinking water standard is 20 nanograms per liter, we're at like 72, which it's still, it's above the reportable concentration in standard, but it's quite low, quite low.
Right. All right, thanks.
I think Jack had a question.
I do. Hey, John, you talked a little bit about understanding groundwater movement on site. You're building off of, we've got many years of groundwater monitoring wells as part of the tritium monitoring that was done on site. So I assume that you're working off of that data and that model, nothing's contrary to what we've already established with the tritium groundwater, correct?
That's correct, Jack. And as you know, we're doing the tritium monitoring also. So we have that data that was put into this data set. So it's all consistent. There's nothing that's not inconsistent. So the two data sets are fitting together quite nicely.
Thank you.
And thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other questions for John?
The audience.
Sure, the two individuals with their hands up, you want to go up to the microphone one at a time, just to introduce yourself, and you could, I think John will do the best he can to answer your questions.
Yes, my name is Gail Mielix. I am a member of the Wampanoag, Heron Pond Wampanoag tribe. I am not representing the tribe. I'm here as an individual. And what I really want to know is there anyone that has oversight of your monitoring of all this?
Yes, under the Massachusetts Environmental Protection Act, the LSP is an independent contractor who works on the behest of the Commonwealth. So I represent the Commonwealth, and I have my license basically says I have to do what's best for the Commonwealth. So I'm out here as an independent contractor, although hired by Holtec to uphold the laws of the Commonwealth.
Okay, well, you'll have to forgive me. I sometimes have a problem with trust, as I think a lot of people do. So it's important to know that the people you are listening to, you can trust. There has to be somewhat of a history with that, which comes very hard.
I would be more than happy to share my background with you if you'd like me to give my background, but I think that most of the panel know my background. And hopefully I have built trust with them.
Okay.
Hi, yes, I'm Amy Troop, and on slide 4, can we have slide 4? Oh, right here? Oh, all right, there we go. In the lower right-hand corner, there's a chart that has compounds, and in the second column, I believe that is the amount that would be where we would cut off, that would be like too much. So at 0.2 for, sorry, my eyesight, I don't have great distance eyesight. Is it benzoylapine?
The benzoate pyrene.
Thank you.
Basically an organic compound.
Okay.
Usually found with petroleum products.
So the second column is 0.2, and that would be the mark where it would start to be dangerous. Am I correct?
That's the mark where it exceeds the drinking water standard. That's
okay.
correct.
So at low numbers, 0.25 is quite a considerable amount more than 0.2. And on the vanadium, if I'm saying that correctly, the level of, the level in drink,
Vanadium.
Okay. The level is 0.03 that is a signal for drinking water to be bad. And that number is, somebody want to help me, that's closer over there?
0.0366.
That's also a considerable amount more. And the arsenic is 0.01 as an acceptable rate in water, and it is 0.013, and that's a considerable amount more. I think that low numbers doesn't really signify to the public exactly that it's a lot more than what is acceptable in our drinking water. I just wanted to make that point.
Well, I just want to be clear that just the groundwater classification, the water right here is not used for drinking water. So it's just the way the Commonwealth classifies groundwater within the state of Massachusetts.
Hi, it's Rosemary Shields with the League of Women Voters of the Cape Cod area. Hi. You're saying reportable concentrations. What does that mean, reportable?
So the Commonwealth has a list of chemicals, probably I think it's about 1,800 of them, that have concentrations that if you exceed, that you have to report to the Commonwealth that you've exceeded the reportable concentrations. Once you exceed the reportable concentrations, you have to proceed through the Massachusetts contingency plan process to identify the source, the nature, extent, and perhaps remediate that compound. Even though you exceed the reportable concentration, that doesn't mean that there's a significant problem. It just means you have to go to the process to demonstrate nature and source and risk. So it's a process that you go through. It's a 4-stage process, and it goes anywhere from 5 years to some of the sites I've been working on. We've been doing out there for 30 years. So it's a process that goes on, and it's fairly common throughout the Commonwealth.
Okay. And so I think it was on the last slide, you had like 20 mg/L drinking water standard, 20. And that what's found on the property is 72.
Yes.
That's 3.5 times the concentration for drinking water. That seems like quite a lot.
It exceeds the drinking water standard,
By
but
3.5 times.
When you look at PFAS throughout the Commonwealth, it's probably not that out of what we'd see elsewhere around the Commonwealth.
So, I'm sorry, so it's not what?
It's lower than some of the things that you would see around the Commonwealth, but it's above the standard, that's correct.
Okay, but that seems like a lot. That doesn't seem 3.5 times?
It exceeds the drinking water standard, that's correct.
Yeah, that's a lot. Okay.
It exceeds, yes.
Mary, you got a question?
I do. In regards to the vanadium, how much, I mean, look, it's 0.03 micrograms per liter versus 0.0366. What is the impact of being 0.0066 over the drinking water limit?
You have to actually run a risk assessment because there's a lot of other parameters that go into determining risk. So that's only one sample, and we really need to look at the changes in chemistry over time and seasonal changes. So this is just the beginning, and we have a long process to go through before we can really make any definitive determinations of what the risk is. But it's a start, and we do exceed, and we are in the MCP process, and we'll work with the Commonwealth to come to conclusion.
I mean, what I'm trying to get at is I'm looking at those two numbers, and it's the 0.3666 is not a magnitude of 10 times worse, correct?
That's correct.
All right, so we are talking minuscule differences, right? We're not talking life-altering numbers. I just need to get that out there, because I think there's some confusion when you're looking at a number that small.
That is correct. That is correct. So what we're doing right now is comparing to standards. We have a ways to go before we look at the true risk. As I said earlier, from all the professional experience throughout Massachusetts, I'm not trying to downplay a site. It's on the lower scale of risk compared to some of the other sites around the Commonwealth.
So you said the low scale, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. I appreciate that.
All right, two more.
I have a question.
Mary, go ahead, one.
Yes, a question. Are there two standards, one standard for groundwater and another standard for drinking water?
The Commonwealth has three standards, one for drinking water, one for indoor air inclusion, and one for discharge to surface water. So those are the three standards that the Commonwealth goes by. So the drinking, well, it depends. Sometimes the vapor intrusion standard is lower than the groundwater standard. Depends on the chemical concern. Sometimes the discharge to surface water standard is lower. So there are three standards that we look at to determine what the risk is, what the impact is, and how we determine nature and extent.
Barry.
Barry Putman, Chair of the Plymouth Board of Health. Just a couple of pieces of information. One is that the federal government is currently in the process of undergoing reviews, but they're aiming to reduce the standards for PFAS down to 4 parts per trillion. And as a matter of fact, they wanted to reduce it even further, but it's below the ability of the current testing to identify concentrations at that level.
That's in drinking water levels?
That's in drinking water.
Okay.
Only, yes. So I guess my question would be, given what you found, perhaps it should be interpreted as the 4 parts per trillion, which is the upcoming federal standard, which I assume the state will likely then adopt as well.
We will have to look at what the regulatory agencies do, and if it goes lower, we'll consider that in our nature and extent and risk assessment. That's correct.
The other piece of information is that, as everybody probably knows, PFAS is the forever chemical. It's extremely hazardous, and there probably, again, is no safe amount in the drinking water. Everybody's probably been already exposed to it. Because of that, the Board of Health is having a public forum at the end of August, to discuss a lot of information about PFAS. Thank you, John.
Barry,
I have a question for
Panel
you.
member Mary would like to ask you a question.
What's the current PFAS level of the drinking water in the town of Plymouth?
I did look at the confidence report that comes out every year, and that amount was not in the confidence report this year. It was in the confidence report last year. I do know the concentration in the Pine Hills water system, which was about 6.
6 what?
Parts per trillion.
Okay, so in the past, what's been the drinking water levels?
In the drinking water level for the town of Plymouth, they found a number of wells. They test the wells individually, and they found one well that exceeded, I think it was around, again, 6 or 8, something like that, parts per trillion. But we will be having the head of the water department at the town of Plymouth coming to our meeting when we have that discussion towards the end of August.
So is the town of Plymouth, people who are hooked into the water supply, drinking that water with that level of PFAS in there? I'm just curious.
I assume most people in the town of Plymouth that are connected to Plymouth Town Water are drinking that water, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Andrew, did you have your hand up?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. John, my question is, under the MCP, if a site exceeds standards, that triggers a response requirement, whether it's a little bit above or a lot above, correct?
That is correct. Hi, Andrew. How you doing? That is correct. We are in the MCP process now. We are beginning the phase 2 part of that process, and the plan we just submitted to DEP for their approval and comment would be the initial part of the phase 2. And as I mentioned earlier, the phase 2 is basically structured to look at the nature and extent of contamination, possibly define the sources, hopefully, and then do a risk assessment both for environmental and ecological risk to see what the impact of the constituents of concern are on human health and the environment.
And then ultimately, to oversimplify, is it correct to say that you either remediate and get the concentrations below the MCP level, or you impose some type of either activity and use restriction or some other physical impediment to limit human exposure to the above standard, but those are the typical range of responses under the MCP?
That's correct. And to be clear, that I don't know if you read the settlement agreement that the potential for an AUL on the property would be a negotiation between the applicant and DEP. So that was built into the settlement agreement.
All right, so my point in asking all these questions is responses are required. The extent to which this is a particularly hot site for a particular constituent or not, or whether people are exposed to similar chemicals from other avenues of exposure, has really no relevance to what the obligations to the responsible party is in the ownership of this site to either remediate down to the standard or limit people's exposure through other means. And so, you know, we spent a lot of time talking about relative exposure limits and exposures in this site, and it's frankly all rather pointless. They got to get down below the standard, or they have to restrict people's exposure to it. It's one or the other. And it doesn't matter whether you're a little bit over or a lot over, you have to limit people's exposure to the chemical. So I'm hoping this doesn't turn into the next proxy war.
I don't think so. I think when we get the nature and extent, hopefully define the sources and then look at the risk assessment, then we can see what happens. But you're absolutely correct. I think I was just giving my personal opinion for people out there that this is not another Superfund site type of site. We'll get through the process, and you're absolutely correct that we have to meet the criteria of the MCP.
But even the Superfund sites ultimately end up having to get cleaned up. So, you know, the whole purpose of the exercise in having a law is to limit people's exposure either through cleanup or restricted access, and it's going to end up being no different on this site, whether you have a long way to go or a short way to go.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Last person.
Yes, my name is Sheena Cameron. I grew up in this area, and I also live in New Mexico. And I'm the co-chair of the New Mexico Multiple Chemical Sensitivities Task Force. And unfortunately, the standards of quantities of chemicals that are considered safe in this country just is not true. And there's at least 18% of the population of this country that reacts very, very seriously to the levels of chemicals that are considered safe. And, you know, statistically, there's going to be a lot of people in the area of this plant that are very chemically sensitive, including myself, including people that I invite there. And so it's just very upsetting to me to use, when I see standards of acceptable levels being used that I know very well are not acceptable for human health. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Moving on to an update, the IWG activities from Mr. Seth Pickering. And
well, I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
No problem, John. We'll love to see you in the room at the September meeting. You're always welcome.
I'll wear my jacket too.
Okay. Jack Priest, Rep. Muratori texted me. He appreciates you correcting him. That was a misstatement on his behalf. He meant to say NRC, not DPH. So thank you.
He sent me a text message also.
Okay. That's Matt.
Yeah, I didn't want to, right, so the DPH is working very closely with the DEP and the other state agencies to make sure we have strong oversight at the plant on the activities that are going on, including both the radiological and the non-radiological. I just wanted to make sure people understood ultimately the regulator is those two federal agencies.
Okay. All right, Jack, thank you. Mr. Pickering, take it away.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. The first thing I need to mention is was done earlier, but the two new IWG members, Jennifer Burrell, who represents Health and Human Services, and David Bryant, who's sitting over here, is the MEMA designee, so welcome. Senator Moran and Mr. Cantwell took up most of my talking points on the decision that came out today. So the next item I have is the water discharge and the permitting application. So Mass DEP has reviewed Holtec's application for a discharge permit modification and has issued a tentative determination to deny the request. Cape Cod Bay is a protected ocean sanctuary under the Ocean Sanctuaries Act. The Act prohibits the dumping or discharge of commercial, municipal, domestic, or industrial waste into ocean sanctuaries or issuing a permit to allow it. The wastewater that the facility proposes to discharge qualifies as industrial wastewater, and therefore the discharge is prohibited by the Ocean Sanctuaries Act. All individual permit determinations are required by Mass DEP's water pollution control regulations to be issued as tentative, subject to public notice. A final determination will be made after a public comment period of at least 30 days, and it is scheduled to be noticed in the paper on the 26th, which will be tomorrow, and the end of the public comment period is scheduled to end on August 28th. The next thing I have for an update is the site assessment work that was just being discussed by Holtec and their consultant. So response actions under the Massachusetts Contingency Plan, or 21E, are ongoing with respect to prior notifications and detections at the site. The Phase 2 comprehensive site assessment, which documents the nature and extent of contamination and contains a risk characterization, is due to be submitted to the department by April 21st of 2024. As part of the cleanup actions, Holtec is conducting groundwater sampling, and the results will be included in the status reports that are submitted to Mass DEP. Other cleanup issues are ongoing. Mass DEP's asbestos section continues to be actively engaged in overseeing the demolition activities occurring at the site, and is meeting regularly with the company to manage the asbestos discovery, identification, abatement, and removal processes. Mass DEP is also continuing to evaluate Holtec's request to change its wastewater disposal system to a Title V system. On public safety, David, if I've got this wrong, let me know, but MEMA is continuing to work with local partners on public safety planning. And that's my report out. I'm available to take questions, and if anybody has 21E questions, Mr. Chairman, if I could ask John Handrahan to come up and give me a hand, because that's his program.
Absolutely. Any questions from Mr. Pickering?
Yes.
Jim?
John, Seth, we obviously have a tentative decision of today, and I think it would help people here if you could lay out sort of what happens now going forward. My understanding is, and please correct me any place that I'm wrong, is that by the August 28th, anyone who wants to submit comments with respect to the tentative decision must do so, and the various papers that are available tell you how and where to send those. What I'm unclear on when or whom basically can request a public hearing. So I guess that would be kind of one question.
Okay, so is that the question, or are you asking if the 30-day period can be extended?
Well,
or both?
I guess it would help people, honestly, to know the question.
Sure.
We have that. You have the period that's now set for the 28th. Can it be extended? If it's extended, is there any guide? I assume there'll be a notice as to how long, but at some time that will come to an end. When that comes to an end, from my reading of the papers that I thought you were good enough to send me, it seems that only those who have submitted comments may receive notice of some further proceedings. I'm not quite clear on that. I'm not quite clear on what the procedure is in terms of a potential public hearing, what the timing, et cetera, would be on that. And I'm completely unclear as to what range of actions DEP might take after receiving comments. And it would, I think it would help people just have a better understanding of the process.
So I think we need to collect your questions. I'll do my best to get you an answer. I don't have answers to all of those questions tonight, Jim, but I can give you at least part of the outline.
Great, thanks.
So, you know, the department's procedural regulations for surface water discharge permits require DEP to issue a final, a draft determination, which we've done, and hold a public comment period before issuing a final decision. So that part is clear, right? So, so the question is, can the 30-day public comment period be extended? Is that one question?
I think that's
So-
something people should know.
Yep, and so the answer that I have here is the public comment period may, at the discretion of the department, be extended upon request by the applicant or by other stakeholders. That's not defined in what I have here, so we can check on that. I'll make a note of that. Or if the department determines that such an extension would be in the public interest as well. So it's a great question. A public hearing may be requested by the applicant, or if the department determines that a hearing would be in the public interest as well. And the department will plan to make the public comments available to the public via its website at this time.
As you've just stated that, does that mean that the public, under the existing regulations, cannot request a public hearing?
I cannot answer that definitively. What I have in front of me says stakeholders, and so I can check and see exactly who that would mean, but I would I mean, usually, and I can't speak to this exact process, but there are other processes that, I work in my bureau, and usually if you make public comment, you're a stakeholder.
No, I understand that. And I guess the kind of general question is, after all the comments are received, presumably DEP will go back and take a look at everything. What range of options does it have with respect to changing, adding to, et cetera, the preliminary or tentative determination? I have no idea.
Yeah, so I can't speak to that without having the comments in front of me.
Great, thank you very much.
So, that is usually part of the process. We will make all of the comments public and provide responses to each one as well, Jim.
And I think with respect to making them public, I know you and I had a conversation, we've had a couple of them, that I know we're all both aware, and I think a number of people are here, that EPA has established a place on its website that it basically puts all of the discussions with respect to this permit, all the correspondence it's received, et cetera, together. And if you could check and see if it would be possible for DEP to do the same, so there's one convenient place to go, I think it would be very useful.
Okay, so is the request that Mass DEP create a website that is dedicated to the public comment process for this permit? Is that what you're asking?
A website that is basically similar to what EPA has done, where it's just posted sort of everything in sight that has to do with the permit procedure and what's going on.
Okay, well, I can check on that.
Yeah. And just one other question, and it's a change of subject, is with respect to the review of the plan that was submitted now 18 months ago. That's 18 months. And as a practical matter, I don't think any of us have heard anything substantive about it. It's not in your bailiwick. But
So
I don't think many people find that long a period of time is really the type of thing that they're expecting for the state to make a review and let both the public and Holtec know. And if you just carry that back and give us some sense as to when this procedure might be completed, I think we'd all find that extremely useful.
Sure, and as you know, we've had a few side discussions on that issue as well, and I will look into that. What I can assure everybody in the room is that it's not holding anything up, that process at this time, in terms of the work that's being done and moving forward on the assessment of the site and the cleanups that are currently going on.
It would help, though, if they would clarify why exactly there is the hang-up. So if it's strictly a strategic move, or if it's actually a substantive one, I've heard that there's not much
I cannot
import
speak
there,
to that,
but it would be
Pine.
nice for everybody to know.
Yeah, I can't speak to that,
I know you can't, but you can ask.
and I will. Mary?
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure.
Something you said kind of troubled me when you said that the Ocean Sanctuaries Act prohibits its discharge of waste into the Cape Cod Bay. does that take into account the 300 million gallons a day that's coming out of Deer Island that comes down our way?
This is in reference to the application that is being reviewed for
Well, no,
the facility.
it's just a question for
Yeah,
how
I'm
do you make
answering
the
your question, Mary.
Pardon me?
I'm answering your question.
Okay.
The decision that was put out today as a draft is relative to the facility and its application.
Okay. I also looked at like the definition of waste from the Ocean Sanctuaries regulations, and it's kind of loosey-goosey, subject to interpretation. It means any unwanted, discarded, or environmentally harmful solid, waste, liquid, or gaseous materials resulting from commercial, municipal, domestic, and industrial activities, including but not limited to garbage, snow, thermal discharges, saline discharges, and sewage.
And so your specific question
my
is
question
what?
is, what is the definition of industrial water?
Industrial wastewater?
Yeah, what is the definition? What's the regulatory definition?
I don't have the regs in front of me, but that's the way it was determined by the people doing the review of the application. And if you would like an answer on the exact definition, we can get it for you.
I would like it, please. Thank you.
Sure.
I appreciate it.
You bet.
Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m.
I can't promise that.
Any other panel members?
But I mean, everybody has access to the regulations if they want to go do a Google search tonight.
No,
Feel free.
I've looked at it, Seth, and I can't find it, so that's why I'm asking the source, the subject
Well, I'm just
matter
being
expert.
fresh to Pine because she was telling me I got to get her something by 8 tomorrow morning. It's not going to happen.
Any other panel members have questions for Seth? All right, I'm going to go to the public. Before we get to this gentleman here, we're going to go to Mr. Rothstein, who is participating remotely. Richard Rothstein.
Good evening. Seth, I have can you hear me, Seth?
I sure can.
Okay. I pressed the right button. Seth, I'm trying to understand better from a regulatory standpoint based on today's draft decision where treated water discharges are not going to be allowed per Mass DEP. But when the plant was operating under its state and federal licenses, there was tritiated wastewater included in the permitted wastewater discharge, if my understanding is correct?
I'm going to defer to the Holtec guys on that one.
Yes, there was.
Okay, so.
Was it in the NIPD's permit? Or are we talking about what was allowed by NRC?
No, the discharge, it was regulated by the NRC, recognized as a radiological effluent discharge flow path by the NEPD's permit.
The original one?
Prior to 2020.
Oh, okay, so the most recent one before 2020.
That's right.
Okay.
So basically, from a health effects standpoint, I don't understand why at the time the plant was operating, it was acceptable for the facility to discharge treated water, but now under decommissioning, it is not acceptable, depending on which regulatory review and evaluation and applicability is being discussed that you mentioned tonight. And I think I sent you a news report earlier this month that the International Atomic Energy Agency, after 2 years of work, a task force of specialists advised by nuclear safety experts from 11 countries, concluded that a controlled release of tritiated water diluted to 1/7 of the World Health Organization's tritium limit for drinking water, with consistent, careful monitoring of the seawater for any environmental impacts, is planned to be happening for the Fukushima plant, I believe, starting in August. And I'm just curious, in the Mass DEP rendering its current draft decision today, do you know if that information had been provided prior to such decision-making today?
I can't answer that, but unless Holtec submitted it as part of their application, it probably was not. So what's your what you're saying tonight, Rich, sounds like a good public comment in terms of the draft permit.
Well,
So
you know, I have to- I
feel
just
free to
have to-
submit it.
Well, I just have to say that, you know, it seems to me what should be good for the goose should be good for the gander unless there was some unknown information at the time permitted discharges were being allowed and something came up between then and now, where from a health effects standpoint, it's not acceptable. So I just hope that there, I don't know, Jack, do you have any thoughts on this also?
So the purview for the permit belongs with the DEP. They're looking at what was submitted by Holtec, what did Holtec ask for, and comparing it to what the regulations require. You know, the plant has been owned by, you know, 2 owner-operators. They were owned as an owner-operator by Boston Edison. They were owned and operated with Entergy, and now different process. It's no longer a power generating facility. It's a industrial site owned by Holtec. So I'm not the legal expert. You know, that's why DEP is working through a process with their experts on what that falls under.
I have to conclude then that I appreciate your comment and Seth's thoughts and comments to the extent he can provide it, and also Dave. But given everything I've heard tonight, I have to come to the conclusion that Entergy was operating the plant not in compliance, maybe in compliance with its permit, but not in compliance with applicable state and federal laws and regulations per the Ocean Sanctuary Act. I'm not an expert on that, but I'm just trying to connect the dots here. And I haven't heard anybody
I wouldn't
in
make that
coming
statement.
months,
Rich.
years on this whole topic, and even when I was serving on the NDCAP, to get some resolution about this. And I hope there can be some resolution about this sooner than later. Thank you.
All right, Rich, thank you.
And I'll be glad to, Rich, if I don't have your email, you can shoot me one. The permit draft, the draft permit is available online, or I can send you a PDF copy. And it's, you know, it's more detailed than my report out here tonight, so it might be helpful.
Mr. Lambert has a comment, and he's actually a lawyer, and so maybe he could address that and help you out.
Rich, basically, what this discussion and a lot of these discussions show is the importance of reading and understanding exactly what the DEP decision was. Because much of what has been said, at least to me, does not appear to be particularly relevant to that conversation. With respect to Rich's specific point on the difference between an operating plant and a decommissioning plant, I would suggest that he and anyone else who has that question read paragraph 8 of the decision, which explains that distinction.
Andrew, you got something to?
Yeah, I'd like to think that we can move on from this. The DEP decision, it's brief, it's 3 pages, and it lays out in pretty clear language, plain English, the differences between what was okay to do legally when the plant was operating and generating power, and the applicability of the Ocean Sanctuaries Act and its relevant exemptions to that scenario versus the scenario in which after cessation of power production, there's a distinction and a difference between the discharge that was proposed and applied for in the permit application and whatever discharge existed prior during power production. It changes the applicability of the act entirely. And as a result, we don't need to any longer get into these mind-numbing conversations about what level of tritium is okay, what's happening in Fukushima, who thinks it's okay, who thinks it doesn't. It's irrelevant. The plain black letter,
Irrelevant.
the plain
Andrew,
black letter reading of the law is that a new discharge from a point source into a ocean sanctuaries, of which Cape Cod Bay is one, is prohibited. Full stop. End of conversation. Doesn't matter what's in the water. Doesn't matter how much is in the water. Doesn't matter what used to be there. All that matters is you can't do it now because it's a new discharge. And that's the end of the conversation.
Andrew, I
Can we
respect
just-
your
can we just
comments,
recognize-
but I'll conclude again that from a health effects standpoint, it seems incongruous to me that from a health effects standpoint, it was okay when the plant was operating, but now it's not okay.
It was legal versus not
All right.
legal.
I'm sorry, it just
All right,
doesn't make
Richard.
sense.
All right, we're going to open this up to the public now.
But, John, before we do...
Dave, I'm sorry, Dave Noyes, panel member.
I just think it's important that we understand that this is a tentative determination. We are in process, all right? There's nothing that is black and white legal yet until we get through the process.
All right, any other panel members have any questions for Mr. Pickering? Any 21E specific questions? Okay, all right, great. We're moving on to the public.
Yeah,
And
actually,
we'll-
now that you said that,
Hold.
I do.
That
I-
guy
I-
back
I
there
do.
is first. You
I
go
do.
over.
I do.
Hey, get up.
21E,
Get in line.
Pine?
You, him. That guy right there.
Are you, is DEP treating this as a 21E site?
Yeah, it's under the MCP, yeah.
Okay.
Yep, that's the monitoring and information that was really part of the ERM report.
You're first.
Yeah.
Okay,
Am I
good.
relieved of my duties?
Yeah, I think so, Seth. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, on to public comment, which
have
we're
a
going to wrap
question,
up by
directed to
8:25 tonight.
utilities.
Sir, what's your name?
I'm Leo Bucklew. Since 1985, I've been a partner, operating very strict limitations. So that's why I was wondering about the latitude that public utilities might apply to this situation. Because we've managed to operate in very strict emitters, for example. We started with one 100-watt emitter that radiated 10-mile circles of coverage on the Mass Pike, and we've added a dozen more over the last 36 years. I've been doing this half my life, and we're very happy with the situation. We started with one 10-mile diameter on the Mass Pike, and by adding on every few years, now we have 13 overlapping emitters on the Mass Pike. Now, do you apply the same limitations and oversight from the Public Utilities Commission regulations as you do to these power projects? We've been operating at 855 to 875 megahertz starting in 1985. And we've been sticking to the 100-watt emitters of radiation. We just added more to cover the whole length of our service area. Without just instead of just putting one 3,000-watt emitter in the middle of the Mass Pike.
So who's the question directed at?
Mr. Chairman, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So what type of emitters are you talking about? What's their function?
For cellular telephones.
Oh, for cell towers?
Yeah.
And is your question specifically radiation or?
I wanted to hear Public Utilities Commission's level of limitations and oversight for other matters also. But, we limited to that low radiation level because people used to be afraid of grazing cows getting brain cancer.
So we regulate different portions of this. So I think this doesn't have to deal with this particular facility, but I'm happy to talk with you after the meeting overall and maybe direct you to some people who can answer your particular questions.
No, I mean, it seems that there's pretty loose latitude for this project. And I was wondering if Public Utilities had a type limitation of oversight for other things, you know, other than our license, you know, like for something like this power license.
So I understand the question. There's different types of emissions overall, and they're regulated by different type sources. So here we're talking about wastewater, which would be regulated partly by the Department of Environmental Protection, as well as other agencies. Some of the things you're talking about are more of the electromagnetic radiation, and those have a different set of standards. They're mainly governed by the federal government. Overall, they're actually not governed by the Department of Public Utilities, but the Department of Telecommunications would deal with some of the cell phone towers overall. So what we're talking about as emitter source does matter a lot for what we're discussing.
Diane.
Hi, Diane Turkle with Save Our Bay MA and Cape Town Winters. And thank you very much, DEP and Governor Moore Healy, for standing up and protecting our communities and denying Holtec the permit. My question is that you're saying it's a tentative permit. Does that mean DEP has made the decision to not issue the permit and you're just waiting for public comments?
So it has to go out in draft for people to have the opportunity to comment on it. And so that's the status of it right now.
Okay, so what is the chance in Holtec? Would you recognize DEP has denied the permit tentatively and accept that?
We recognize that they have tentatively denied the permit, and we understand that we have until August 28th to provide additional information and/or request a public hearing.
Okay, because they said in Section 16 of the Act that the Act's prohibition against discharges into ocean sanctuaries and that none of the exceptions have been applies to Holtec. So I don't know, reading it as a public person, it looks pretty solid that Holtec's not going to get the permit. You also know probably too that the public opinion with the 300,000 signatures, Senator Markey, Senator Warren, Representative Key, everyone has said no dumping in the bay. And so that will be overwhelmingly in support of your wonderful decision. I just want to kind of get a guarantee that we're moving forward with a denial. Holtec has complete disregard for state authority, and we've seen that in New Mexico and in other areas. We know when the settlement agreement was, when Holtec went to buy Pilgrim from Entergy, that the state had to file contentions against that sale because they didn't meet some of the requirements that the state had, and they finally had a settlement agreement that Holtec said they would abide by state laws. And now we have a state law with the state saying that they are denying the permit, and Holtec is going to argue against it. I'm just really concerned that the state stays strong in this effort. And the people must stay vigilant, because I don't trust Holtec. We don't trust Holtec.
Made this statement, this is the part of the process that they're in. They deserve the process just like anybody else would.
Right, right.
Thank you, Diane.
Okay.
Brian.
My name is Brian Campbell, retired electrical engineer, and I strongly support discharging treated water from Pilgrim Nuclear Station into Cape Cod Bay. Holtec is also safely decommissioning Indian Point Nuclear in New York. Generation Atomic calculates that water outside that plant, if one were to hypothetically consume it, they would need to drink approximately 80 gallons to equal the radiation dose received from eating a banana. This will be about the same for Pilgrim. The presentations by Holtec to this panel shows Holtec to be a good corporate citizen, performing the Pilgrim decommissioning in a truthful and open manner that should be commended. Instead, Senator Markey expects Holtec to fund Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, WHOI study of treated water discharges, which is not in any agreements for Pilgrim's decommissioning. Unfair. And Holtec is right to refuse Markey's funding demands. Markey is funding the WHOI $113,000 study with taxpayer-funded $75,000 provided by North Sea Grant, and WHI will pick up the other costs. I question the bias of this study. As $263 million in revenue in 2020, WHOI shifts its conclusions on studies depending on funding sources. A 2017 report consistent annual use of areas proposed for offshore wind projects by a significant proportion of North Atlantic right whale population, with a strong correlation between season and presence. In May 2021, Woods Hole marine ecologist Mark Bromganter said in an interview, "We already have a fairly industrial ocean with shipping traffic and fishing activities. Adding these large wind farms with many, many, many turbines is certainly concerning." Despite this statement and other research findings, Wood Hole released a statement in November 2021 saying they are excited to use Department of Energy funds to help make offshore wind more sustainable. In response to an email inquiry by Save the Right Whales Coalition, Woods Hole said they received $500,000 donation from Ørsted. Woods Hole has supported offshore wind since 2019. Thank you.
Next.
Hi, Carolyn McCreary and I, Susan Tordella, we are volunteer members of a grassroots environmental group that advocates for polar bears and for the greenest, fastest way to fuel this great electrification to stop the climate change. Carolyn served 2 terms in the Air Select Board and led our town to be a green community in 2011. Our group supports Holtec's release of water-containing residual tritium. If you look at the data and the precedents of nuclear plants around the world, we are convinced that Holtec can safely release this slightly tritiated water without any negative impact on water, sea life, people, or the fishing industry. There's so much attention and regulation paid to nuclear power. The NRC keeps a tight handle on it. I mean, what's the difference between the water when the plant was open and when the plant is closed? And this is just a draft permit. Every energy source has its trade-offs. Unfortunately, it is so hard to separate fact from fiction about nuclear energy that is not supported by science. This misinformation has cultivated an anti-nuclear bias based on fear, not fact, research, and data. The fact is, tritium occurs naturally in the ocean, and it will be released slowly with water mixed 20 times its own volume of seawater. And this tried and true method has been successfully used for decades at nuclear plants worldwide without side effects since 1950. It's been studied over and over, and I brought a study from a Dutch scientist. The NRC of Canada has studied it. And I'd love to see the data that says otherwise, because it's just a minor nuclide. So the extreme concentration, how much? I'll drink 80 gallons, no problem, if you will, with me. The extreme concentration of tritium is only a problem when researchers create an overdose of it in a lab. To observe any health effects, tritium levels must be artificially elevated by millions of times to what the public are normally exposed. And who will pay for this if we have to export all this water? Where is it going to go, in someone else's backyard? And the cosmogenic natural tritium concentrations found in ocean water measure about 0.7 becquerels per liter. And you compare that to similar radionuclides in our blood that measure 100 times more than that. Our own blood carries more becquerels per liter of radionuclides as compared to ocean water with the similar naturally occurring radionuclide tritium. It seems reasonable for Holtec to discharge water containing the residual tritium following the regulations and best practices as plants do around the world, whether it's before or after decommissioning. We polar bears and humans have trust in repeated studies. I'm going to pass this article around. You can have copies.
Can you just repeat your name, please?
Susan Tordella, Tordella. And we urge you to let Holtec do its job, and we'll be commenting, our group will be commenting on the draft. It's just a draft, it's not a done deal.
Six more individuals. Let's try to keep it to about 2 minutes apiece. Thank you.
I'm Carolyn McCreary, if you're taking names. The trouble with tritium is there is no trouble with tritium. At any level outside the lab, either experimental or manufacturing, tritium is harmless. Every year, we routinely release millions of gallons of slightly tritiated water to the ocean, large lakes, and large rivers.
Mr. Chairman, could we please have order?
Go ahead, ma'am.
So every year, millions of gallons of slightly tritiated water are released to ocean, large lakes, and large rivers from almost every commercial nuclear reactor in the world. And they've done so for decades, all in accordance with globally accepted nuclear safety standards. And no adverse effects on the environment or humans have ever been seen. This is not surprising, since tritium is created on Earth's upper crust, upper atmosphere, and there's more of that created than by commercial reactors. Natural tritium is continually created in the upper atmosphere, which forms 70 quadrillion becquerels. Tritium then rains out onto surface waters from which we end up drinking or fishing. Even more important, according to the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, there are 74.1 sextillion becquerels of other high-energy emitters already in the world's oceans. Nuclear plants routinely and safely release diluted concentrations. These authorized releases are closely monitored by utilities and reported to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. And the information is made available to the public on NRC's website. So what is the effect of this discharge on humans, the body of water into which the titrated water is discharged, or ecosystem? First, tritium has the weakest radioactivity of any radionuclides. It's difficult for such low energy beta to get through water, cell walls, and other materials in between the radionuclide and any DNA. The energy mostly gets dispersed within the electron clouds of other molecules. Tritium is so harmless that regulators do not know what the maximum regulation limits to set. For example, Australia sets a limit that is 100 times more than the US sets.
I got you timed at 3 minutes. How much more time do you need?
2 minutes.
No.
Okay, 1 minute. Discharging tritium from power plants has never resulted in the passing of any of these limits. No adverse effects to human health or the environment has ever occurred from these releases, and we've been doing them for 60 years.
Thank you, Carolyn. Great job. Next.
Rosemary Shields, League of Women Voters, Cape Cod area. I just, number one, just want to thank the Department of
Is there a green light lit up?
There, okay. Rosemary Shields, League of Women Voters, Cape Cod area. I'm changing the subject. I have a couple of questions for David Noyes. I've been coming to the NDCAP meetings for 4 years, and you're now starting, I mean, you're not now, I'm still trying to figure out, what does license termination mean?
It is a submission that we make to the NRC, and they terminate the operating license of the plant. So right now we're technically continuing to run the facility under an operating license. They determine the standard by which we can terminate that operating license, and the only thing that will remain as a NRC-controlled radiological area will be the dry cast storage area.
Okay, and you said you were applying for it October 2024. What was October 2024?
That's correct, yeah. That's when we will make the submission to the NRC.
Okay, and you're going to be there for how long? Didn't you say something the last time that you were extending it 4 years because the money that you have wasn't doing well on the stock market?
Right.
So explain that to me also.
So the partial site release date, which is the date that the NRC approves the license termination plan for everything but the ISFAC, that moved 4 years with the activities associated with dismantling the reactor vessel.
And so you're planning on vacating the property what time?
We'll have partial site, our plan for partial site release is 2031.
2031.
That's correct.
And then after that, all it is the SPDs that you have to monitor or keep that. And how many acres is that out of the entire acreage? Approximately 400?
No, it's probably 8 to 10 acres.
8 to 10 acres,
Right.
and then the rest of it, like the 1,000 acres, will be released?
That's right.
Okay, and so that's in 2030, 31.
That's right.
I'm going to probably be asking more questions at other meetings, but thank you. That's really helped me a lot. Thanks.
Barry, go ahead.
Okay, thank you for letting me address the...
90 seconds?
90 seconds. I have a script that timed it just around 2.5 minutes.
Oh, perfect.
First of all, thank you for letting me address the group again, and thank you certainly to Seth and the DEP and to the Lamperts and Henrietta for providing support. I won't make the same mistake I made other times. I'm Barry Potvin, the chair of the Plymouth Board of Health, also chair of the state DPH-funded Southern Plymouth County Public Health Excellence Collaborative. My professional background includes a doctorate in genetics, decades of scientific research at 3 prestigious schools of medicine, as well as 36 years of undergraduate teaching experience in genetics, biochemistry, microbiology, public health, and epidemiology. I've repeatedly expressed my concerns about genetic damage, in fact, mutations caused by radioactive isotopes such as tritium. This is especially dangerous for children and pregnant women since their cells are undergoing rapid division, the exact time when mutations usually occur. Radiation-caused mutations are also known to affect rapidly dividing cells in everyone, with links to leukemia and various types of lymphoma. Although the amount of radiation likely to be received by any one individual from the tritium-contaminated wastewater may seem small in comparison to background radiation exposure, any additional exposure will cause increases in the incidence of serious health issues such as birth defects and cancers among the population. This follows from the widely accepted concept that there is no safe dose of radiation, and the genetic damage that ensues is additive over time. It's also apparent that the dangers of low-dose chronic radiation exposure have only recently received the attention needed by researchers who study the health risks of radiation. It's also apparent that the proposed release of wastewater containing high amounts of tritium into Cape Cod Bay can result in the ingestion, inhalation, and absorption of this isotope. Organically bound tritium is especially hazardous since it lingers in the tissues for longer periods of time and works its way up the food chain from phytoplankton and shellfish that filter large amounts of water. The members of our Board of Health have a responsibility and a sworn duty to do everything that they can to protect the public from health hazards regardless of the source. We call upon the NDCAP members and Holtec officials to also demonstrate the same concern for the health and livelihoods of our residents and visitors, as well as to join us in protecting our increasing fragile environment from unnecessary risks. Widespread community opposition to Holtec's plans must be given more importance than maximizing corporate profits. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Thank you, everyone. My name's Benjamin Cronin. I live in Duxbury. I am speaking on my own behalf tonight. Just a few points. I do appreciate the speakers' perspectives who are on the opposite side. I would say, though, that they essentially concede the point that the DEP is making in the tentative finding, which is that even slightly tritiated water is a pollutant under the Act. And indeed, we often hear, not this time, but we have heard in the past Mr. Campbell describe the plant as an industrial cathedral. I think it is therefore fair to describe its waste products as industrial waste, which are prohibited at Section 15.4 under the Act. So that sort of as a preliminary, I would note that I am very gratified by the decision or the tentative decision of the Mass DEP. I think before we get to my comment, I would just note that I think preemption here is not in evidence. I think we have, and again, I'm not a lawyer, but we have the settlement agreement, which is a contract and not preempted. And then we have a corpus of case law. If you look at the case law, the U.S. Supreme Court finds in a number of cases that there is only preemption if there is a conflict between state and federal regulations. There is no federal regulation requiring Holtec to do this. They wish to, or for really, let's be honest, the sake of profit. And that's fair, they're a private company, but they are not required to. So there is no conflict, I would suggest, Mr. Chairman. I would further note that the public hearing that is called for under 314 CMR 2.071 says, quote, "The department shall schedule and conduct such hearing in a community within the areas affected by the facility or discharge, which is the subject of the permit," end quote. And so I would think that it would be very much appropriate that Plymouth be, as the host community, the site of that meeting on the 28th. And that's all for this evening. Thank you.
Perfect, Ben, thank you. Next.
All right, my name is Leslie Danielson. I live here in Plymouth, and I'm going to be real quick. I just have a question. At the May 22nd NDCAP meeting, there was a discussion on the status of the annual report that you're required to file with the state of Massachusetts. A, I'd like to know what the status of that report is, and B, how can I obtain a copy of that report?
Copy's been submitted, correct?
The report was submitted to the governor, and the copy, it's also posted on the NDCAP website. If you go to mass.gov and search NDCAP, you will get there.
Okay, because I looked briefly, but you've got to do the search up at NDCAP in the
Well,
top.
if you search NDCAP or Nuclear Decommissioning Advisory Panel, you will find it.
Annual report, great, thank
The
you.
link is too long for me to remember.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Margaret Rankin, and I own the Bursley Manor and Inn on Cape Cod in West Barnstable, and I have just 2 points I'd like to address. The first is the confusion about this presentation. We understood on Monday when we spoke with you, Chairman, that we couldn't go ahead without sharing it with the panel, without sharing it with Vice Chair Dubois, and so we shared it with you on Monday, and Vice Chairman Dubois told us that she read it on Tuesday. And then she started saying that there was nothing going to happen to the fishing industry, but our presentation didn't have anything to do with the fishing industry. So now that it's clear that it's about the effect of tritium on humans from preconception to adulthood, we would like to know if, now that we've tried to present this presentation twice in March and also this time, and we're denied both times, can you put us on the agenda for the September meeting and give us 20 minutes to talk about it?
I'll share the presentation with the board, and then we can take a consensus to see if we can get you an agenda item.
Well, Vice Chairman Dubois, you told me the reason you couldn't put me on the agenda was that the presentation misrepresented the research of Dr. Makijani, but we spoke with him, and he approved the presentation, and I told you that during our conversation. Please let me finish. Let me finish.
You also repeated stuff about what I said incorrectly, too. So
I did not say anything. Only Mrs. Lambert spoke. I did not say anything. You can't say what I said because I didn't say it. Anyway, will you put us on the agenda?
I cannot guarantee that at this point in time.
Why not?
Because you won't be chair.
Because I'm going to address that under the last agenda item.
Okay, and the
so
second point.
I'm not going to commit. It's possible that I won't be in this role or on the committee, So I can't promise that somebody else is going to put you on the agenda. You would have to take that up with someone else. That's why.
So is Vice Chair succeeding you? Vice Chair Dubois succeeding you in the
You-
role
you
of
need-
chairman?
That would require a vote, and that's the last agenda item on tonight's
Okay.
docket.
The second point is during my conversation with Vice Chairman Dubois on Friday night, she told me that the amount of tritium in the water could hurt no one, that it was of no concern to anyone. And I said, well, the last time I was at the meeting, I asked Dave Noyes how much tritium was in the water. He said he didn't know. And she told me that he told her that it was 0.0001 curie. Well, that's not a figure that can be applied to an amount of tritium. Dave, do you know how much tritium is in the water now?
There's 11 curies of tritium in the 1.1 million gallons.
Curie is a measure of radioactivity. It is not a measure of weight of the tritium.
Oh, you want it by weight, not by
Yes,
its activity?
right.
I don't know what it is. Probably, I don't know, a few grams.
Okay, well, the tritium that's being released from Fukushima is going to be released over 60 years. What are your plans for release into the bay?
It's also 1 million times the quantity of the water that we have for
You
release.
have figures to show us how much tritium is in the water?
We can provide you with the data
Okay.
for tritium in the water.
That would be great. That's all. Thank you.
Good evening, Peter Dalton. I'm a Duxbury Shellfish Advisory Board member and also a member of the Stellwagen Bank Charter Boat Association. I got a question for Seth. On the testing of the water, and where the nuclear rods have sat for 47 years, I guess, right? When you did the testing of the water, how deep did you go in that tank?
Which testing of the water?
In the nuclear rods, the ones that were done a little over a month ago.
We didn't do any testing in nuclear rods.
No, where the nuclear rods have been taken out and put into dry cask. The water that was most recently tested.
So the water that's in question, right, the 1.1 million, you're asking about?
Yes.
Where we took the samples?
Yes.
We took them in the Taurus.
Okay.
We took them in the dryer separator reactor area, and we also took it in the fuel pool.
Okay. How deep did you go in that, for that test at the pool?
Dave, how deep were all the water was fully circulated?
Yeah, we were 12 to 15 feet deep in the spent fuel pool.
David, if I'm not mistaken, that tank is 45 feet deep. Why didn't you go to the bottom?
Because the water was thoroughly mixed. It was sampled.
Why didn't you go to the bottom and take tests?
Why did we not? Because
Yeah.
we could get a representative sample at a
I don't think
height
it would be
far above
representative
that.
if, on a tank like that with all the nuclides and the metals and everything else to test only 20 feet down.
You mix
and not
the
go down
water.
45 feet.
It's a standard chemical practice of being able to.
You should have gone to the bottom to get the test.
And do you know what the testing purpose was? Do you know why we did it?
Yes.
Why did we do it?
Tell me why.
You just said you knew why. Do you know why?
I want to know why you didn't go to the bottom of the tank.
Well, because it was a representative sample of the water in those different volumes.
Okay.
That's why.
Okay. I get another.
And the reason we did the testing was because people that come to this meeting asked to know what was in the water in its current state. And so we did that. It has nothing to do with what the discharge limits might be.
I just find that very interesting that it wasn't done to the bottom of that tank. Okay, I'm going to move on.
Well, that's your opinion.
That's right, it is.
We appreciate it.
We have 28 oyster farms in our town. We supply oysters all over the country. The perception alone of this nuclear waste being dumped into our bay is going to ruin the businesses of all of us. And I find it I can't believe that you would even do this and ruin all the families and all the income just for one guy from India to take $20 million in his pocket and screw everybody else. It's not fair. Quick question on the dry cask. What is the mill thickness of the stainless steel that surrounds the dry cask, the rods outside on the SLG, the slab on grade?
I don't have that
Okay.
right off the top of my head.
On the concrete surrounds of that, is it precast, the cast-in-place concrete?
It's cast in place, it's poured in place.
Okay. Did you have tests done on the cylinders of the concrete during placement to be tested at 7, 14, and 28 days for PSI strengths?
We did slump testing
All
on
right,
the concrete.
where are the results of those tests, and what lab did those?
NRC oversaw them, and I can't remember
What
the name
lab
of
did
the
they
lab.
go to be crushed at the 7, 14, and 28-day curing process? You have no idea? Can I have all those records? Do you have control joints and expansion joints placed in the concrete surrounds? for thermal movement. On the concrete, the cast-in-place concrete. It's not post-tension concrete, it's cast-in-place concrete. Those tests will tell you if you're gaining those strengths in 7, 14, 28 days. Is a 3,000-pound, 4,000, or 5,000-pound PSI requirement? You should know if you're obtaining those strengths in so many days. Those tests should be for the public to see. You should have control joints and expansion joints on those tanks. What is the thickness of the cast-in-place concrete? It's not post-tension concrete, it's cast-in-place concrete, right? I wish you could give me all those answers at the next meeting. Thank you very much.
Can you repeat your name? I never caught it.
Peter Dalton.
Dalton, thanks.
Yes, I work for an MIT lab. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, all of that data is available from the NRC if he wants to do a Freedom of Information Act request.
Okay, thank you. On to the last agenda item. So the last agenda item is a discussion of the reorg of the panel. And why it came up earlier is that typically in the town of Plymouth, when you have the yearly elections occur, I believe the third Saturday of May, and with typically past practice has been that within a month after the board is reorged, the board will come in, there will be an agenda item, and there's roughly 20 to 30 select board committee assignments. NDCAP, Community Preservation Committee, Affordable Housing, the Council on Aging, and the list goes on and on. And if there's any new members, those are allocated, and sometimes there are individuals who want to hold on to certain committee assignments they have, and then there's other times where certain individuals might want to relinquish certain committee assignments they have, if you know what I'm trying to imply here. So I don't know why it happened this year, but it occurs tomorrow night in this room where, unfortunately, I thought it would have been done a month ago, but it's happening tomorrow night, you know, more than 2 months after the May election. And I do know that some of my other 4 colleagues on the Plymouth Select Board are interested in serving on this committee. And I'm not going to put up a fuss, if you will, if they want to take over this seat. So that's why I will not commit to putting anything on the agenda for late September, because if I'm not sitting in this role, I'm not going to tell someone else what to do. So that's why. Obviously, if I find out tomorrow night that none of the other 4 are actually interested, I will return, because the board does have to be represented. But even if I do return, the last thing I would like to do is to continue on as chair. Okay, so I don't know what else I don't know what other clarity I can provide on this topic right now. So that's what prompted that going on the agenda. In a perfect world, this is the meeting. Typically, what I see locally is that once you get into a committee reconvenes, the first meeting after the beginning of the new fiscal year, which is July 1st, any committees, all those committees, they reorg. They vote a chair and a vice chair, a clerk to take minutes, okay? And in a perfect world, that should have happened tonight, but it didn't. So obviously, that's probably an agenda item that certainly has to be committed to and put on for the late September meeting. So I don't know if anybody else had any other thoughts on this issue.
Well, I have a thought. John, we've really appreciated your chair. You've been very fair and polite to the panel and to the public, and run a very efficient meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. I tried.
Yeah, I would second that. Basically, I took a few minutes over the weekend and Googled characteristics of a good chair. And there's a lot out there. And we've been very fortunate that we've had 2 good chairs, Sean and then John. And the things that come through most on what are the characteristics, and you heard a lot of it tonight, is the ability at a meeting, and frankly, hopefully when you set the agenda, to provide the opportunity for all sides of questions to be heard, at least as far as running the meetings are concerned and preparing the agendas. the stuff I read was fairly clear. In that role, the chair has to be impartial. The chair can vote, and I would expect in many cases the chair vote on issues would probably be quite different than mine. But the bottom line on being a good chair is to be sure that you've enabled both sides of all issues to be heard. You haven't tried to browbeat one side or another, but you've let the panel members, based on full information, reach their own decisions. And both Sean and John have done a very good job in trying to make that possible.
All right, is there a motion to adjourn? Unless there's more discussion on the chair. Second? All right, all those in favor? Thank you, everyone. It looks unanimous.